Last week on Friday the 20th, we lost one of our brothers. For those of you that knew him, you probably loved him and called him a brother. For those of you that didn't, when you hear some of the stories, you're going to love him from the stories. If I were going to announce our friend Brian, what I would say about Brian was he was a son, he was a lover of life, he was a purveyor of fun. He happened to work at Aldo Property Group in commercial real estate. But he taught me a lot of things. He taught me to have fun with the people that were in front of me, always. And Brian Bondis will certainly be missed, but never forgotten, because death can take life away from us, but it'll never take away the relationship we had with that person. Can we honor Brian with just a quick moment of silence? If Brian were here, I think one of the things he would want me to say is, the bar's open, and let's have some fun. And so we certainly love Brian. Moving on, we've got, like Dave said, we have some great sponsors tonight. Coming up after us to speak is going to be Matt Macbeth from the Brookfield Group, one of our sponsors. And one of the great things about Matt that a lot of folks don't know is Matt and I are competitors. We're both in the IT space. We go after the same customers, we go after the same types of things. But at the end of the day, that does not matter, because Matt is my friend and my brother. And at the end of the day, I know him and I know his story, he knows mine. So we get a chance to compete, but hey, that's a lot of fun. But after hours, we get to be friends. Matt Macbeth.
Thanks, buddy. So I didn't realize if you sponsor, you have to speak, so I have to reconsider that. So if you're looking at sponsor an event, you're going to have to do this. One of the things that's awesome about Synergize, like Jason said, there's not another meetup group I've ever been in the world where we can be in the same room, let alone partner up and do stuff together. To talk about relationships over everything, so I met Aaron through Brian Bondis about 2 years or so ago. And then through Aaron, Jason, and his wife Kelly, and Eric and Kristen aren't here, I knew Bill Farrar over there from Fountains of Hope. And one of the really cool things that Synergize has done with Fountains of Hope is I was previously on the board, and yeah, it's all right, but not very good. But now they have Kelly and Kristen, who are way better than I am on the board. And so if it wasn't for Synergize, I would probably still be on the board and not as good. But talking globally, so Bill, what's the stat? How many, one water purifier serves how many people? Lots. Yeah, let's call it 1 million. So just by Jason and I being allowed in the same room, that's like 1 million people got water who really need it. So that's kind of cool. I'll call that a success. I've only known, before Synergize, probably 4 people in this room. So the Ripples impact is pretty awesome. And now we're seeing Synergizes pop up and meetings popping up in Westfield and Brownsburg. And so just lots of stuff awesome happening. But for me to even get here, I came here because of, I met Brookfield Group and Fatty, who's the founder, and he's one of the most amazing people in the world, and he has a great story. And then before that, the whole reason we moved to Carmel is because of this bicycle trail. Moved here 14 years ago because the bicycling is cool. It's probably not the best reason to take a job, but that's why I moved here. So I'm looking forward to Mayor Brainer's up to date tonight, and Brian Kelly's up next.
Thanks, Matt. Yep. Good seeing you. Thank you, Matt. Well, it's certainly an honor to be here this evening. A lot of times people ask me, so what is Synergize? What do you do? And I say, I think the best way to explain that or answer that is that we help. We like to help. And they'll say, well, help whom? Well, let me tell you, I'll talk about the nonprofit organizations, but first and foremost, we help our community. We all care about our community. We love being here, and we love all the people that we know and we work with and we just see out and about. And when Aaron was talking about this event this evening and the ripples of impact, and you have the honor of introducing the mayor, and I kept thinking, boy, you know, when you look up impact in the dictionary, you'd probably see Jim Brainerd's face there. Because we moved here in '96, and Carmel was great then even, but there's obviously no comparison. We remember looking around, there was this old abandoned strip center just north of City Hall. And Nancy, I know you remember that, and certainly the mayor. And it reminded me of a conversation I had with Ron Carter many, many years ago. And he recounted a conversation he had with the mayor as they were walking out of City Hall. And as they're walking out, Ron notices this nearly abandoned strip center. And he says, you know, we need to get someone in here, some kind of a developer to come in, because it needs a new roof and it needs new siding, and the parking lot needs to be repaved. And Ron said, the mayor turned to me and he says, well, I think we can do better than that. And he knew at that moment that Carmel was off and running. It was obviously great timing that we moved here, because '96 was your first year in office, is that correct? And so, and it also reminded us too that a lot of this growth hasn't been easy, right? I mean, nowadays we look around and say, well, who wouldn't want to be here? And it's easy to envision all these people wanting to be by the Monon, for example. Well, I remember, and I know you do too, when the mayor was trying to extend the Monon up here, and that was in the mid-'90s, I think, somewhere around there. And there were a lot of people against it. There were people protesting. Nancy, I'm sure you remember that. People blocking it so that it could not be extended. Hard to believe, isn't it? And now, I always love it when I look at real estate listings, and at the very top, on or near the Monon. And I just think that is just great. I just always smile whenever I see that. But thinking back to the '90s, it wasn't easy. This didn't just happen. Someone had to really work it, and that's due to the mayor and his incredible team. So I think we're all proud to call Carmel home, and it's just amazing. And like I said, I'll never forget that conversation with Ron Carter, because '96, that's when it really all started. And also I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there was the assumption that the mayor would just go after sports opportunities, because that's what mayors typically do, because that's kind of the low-hanging fruit. Oh, everybody loves sports, let's just build a stadium or build, you know, hockey rink or something. I think there were the Simon family was involved, and the mayor said, no, that's not what we want to do here. So I don't know how many people get away with saying no to the Simons, but the mayor did. And it reminded me of something that my mentor told me back in the '80s, that success oftentimes is determined not by what you accept in life, but rather what you have the guts to reject. And so I think that really applies to the mayor, that he had a specific vision, and if something didn't fit, he had the guts to reject it. And then lastly, before I introduce our keynoter, I was in a meeting last week and met someone who moved to Carmel from New York City. So of course, I just had to ask, so what do you think of Carmel? He said, immediately, I love it. He says, it's just fantastic, and he started talking about it. He said, but then he ended it by saying, most of all, I love the civility. And I thought that was just a great word to describe and talk about a great legacy if people refer to your community, our community, as civil, especially nowadays when everyone's ready to clobber everyone else. So with that, please welcome Mayor Jim Brainerd.
Thank you very much, Brian. I want to start by talking a little bit about Brian Bondis, that was instrumental in starting this organization. I want to talk about Brian's life in relationship to ripples of impact. I met Brian when he was in his teenage years. He was working on an Eagle Scout project. He needed to interview the mayor, so he called me and we met. And then when he was about to receive his Eagle Scout award, he contacted me again and asked, would you formally present it at the official ceremony, which I did. Then a few years later, after college, he popped into my office as a reporter, and he was covering Carmel and what I was doing in office, and it was a good reporter, worked hard at it, then decided to go out and work in the commercial real estate business, and was such a huge booster of our community with his clients, trying to work with the city to make this a special place. So it was with, you know, it was just, he told me he had a peanut allergy, but I had no idea how bad it was. It was just quite a shock Friday when I heard this news. Another quotation came to mind, though. It's like, we all die. The goal isn't to live forever. The goal is to create something that will. Another one that's always attracted me is, you know, you're never really dead until the ripples that you've created die away. And Brian's humor, and even more importantly, I think his enthusiasm for life in this city will have ripple impacts for a long, long time. Brian was kind enough to take 2 or 3 of my topics and talk about them. Thank you, Brian. Just kidding. But I wanted to talk about some of the challenges of, we've tried to change the city. You know, the conditions in 1995, 96, Carmel, great schools, always has. We had a great public library system. What we didn't have was much of a downtown. We didn't have any parkland. We didn't have any bike trails. We really had no cultural institutions unique to Carmel. And in that first campaign was really a listening tour. I went and knocked on thousands of doors and heard from people all over the city about what their hopes and dreams and aspirations were for the place that they had chosen to raise their families and call home. And what I heard over and over again was that they wanted a place they could be more proud of, a place with a downtown they could show visiting relatives and friends and business visitors, a place where they could walk to dinner and a show. They wanted public parks. They wanted to see the Monon Trail extended. In other words, they wanted a traditional city, not the typical car suburb where you had to drive everywhere you needed to go. And they wanted a place that exuded a sense of community. And so we started to do a lot of study and work about how designs of cities. I remember several people, I think, when I was asking for votes, said to me, you know, we go to Europe and we see these beautiful old cities. Why can't we build cities in the United States like that? And so we started talking to city planners and others and looking at the history of cities and realized that we actually did in this country until the car came along, and then we started designing for cars instead of people. And so I thought it's going to take quite a bit of change and investment to turn this car suburb into a walkable, pedestrian-friendly city with its own cultural institutions that complements Indianapolis, but stands on its own as a city itself. And that's what I was hearing that people wanted. So several things were important. I want to talk about one overarching theme, though. You know, we live in a conservative area, a fiscally conservative area. We realized early on, I think, that there's a difference between stinginess and investment. It's real easy not to spend money on anything, but then what happens? businesses won't locate there because the roads aren't any good and the schools aren't any good and there aren't any public parks and there aren't any bike trails and there aren't cultural institutions and other things that people want to go to, so they don't come. They go somewhere else because they need to attract a workforce from the coast, places with mountains and oceans. And they have to, you have to invest in a community. You have to be careful about it, not invest too much. Watch the bond ratings and watch the debt load and all that sort of thing. Good fiscal management like any well-run organization. But you have to get beyond the idea that a community can grow and grow successfully. The only way you can do it is by investing in the infrastructure of that community. And that's what I believe city government should be doing, is building the best infrastructure anywhere. And infrastructure, people say, what's infrastructure? Well, it's not only the roads and bridges and sewer and water systems and police and fire stations. It's infrastructure like this organization. It's a cultural, it's cultural in some ways. It's a community where people want to help each other, where they kick in to make it. They all want to make it the best place, or most people do, and they're concerned about the community and their neighbors that live there, and that it's a welcoming place. So infrastructure is a pretty big topic, the way I define it. So some of the things we did early on that created some impact, I think, Hazeldale Road only existed between 146th Street, about, maybe 4 or 5 blocks south, as a one-lane road in each direction, and been built by a developer who wanted to put some houses in. And we knew that for the east side of Carmel to grow, that needed to be extended down to 96th Street. And so it's an expensive road. Today it'd be $75 or $80 million. Back then it was about $22, $23 million. And I said, let's go out and borrow the money to build that road. We'll get it, that land around it will develop, and we'll get far more back in taxes than we spend on it. Well, a lot of people were opposed to that. They didn't want us to issue that bond. Of course, today it's paid off, and we've had almost $1 billion of investment made along Hazeldale Parkway. It was also the first we chose to do it differently than any other road had ever been done in Carmel before. We decided to have a 70-foot green space on either side, or at least down to right where the quarry starts. And we buried the power lines north of 116th Street. I don't think that had ever been done in Carmel before. And we decided to try this new thing along above the curb called multi-use trails or bike paths. That had not been done along any road in Carmel until we built Hazeldale Parkway. And of course that became the standard for every renovated or new road that we later did in Carmel. So the impacts of jumping in and convincing the community that we should borrow the money to build that road, which seems like a simple thing today, for a lot of you, Hazeldale Parkway has just always been there. But it was key to the development on this side of the community. Carmel today is about 50 square miles. When our administration took office, it was 18 square miles. The school district was bigger, the library district was larger, but there's all these unincorporated areas, and a lot of it was little pockets. So a brown sheriff's car would come on one side of the street if somebody made a 911 call. On the other side of the street, there'd be a blue and white Carmel police car. Street near my house, just about 300 yards away, was one of those border streets with one of those pockets. And literally, when I first moved to Carmel before I was mayor, I was shaking my head because the Carmel snowplow would come and do one side of the street, and then the county plow would come a few hours later, if we were lucky, and do the other side of the street. And if it never came, only one side of the street was plowed. I thought, how stupid is this? And people don't like annexation, and we used to call it the A word. It's a really bad word. I remember when we annexed one neighborhood, somebody wrote a letter to the paper comparing me to Hitler for annexing Austria. I'm serious. It was, people got really angry about it, but we persisted. And of course, the people in this, I was lucky, it was only the people in the city voted, so they thought that everybody ought to be in the city like they were. And through lots and lots of conversations and a 20-year process, we did over 56 annexations and met the original goal of making all of Clay Township the city of Carmel. And fortunately, we're now landlocked, and I'll never have to worry about another annexation ever, ever, ever. But the impact of that was that we had the resources we could leverage to make the city so much better, to build the Palladium, to do all the like work with the state to do the Keystone project. How many people here remember Keystone when it still had stoplights? It was a state road. The state was going to spend $45 million in 2006 to add lanes. Of course, it would have impacted this neighborhood and many neighborhoods along it by having those extra lanes. Truckers were using the air brakes. You could hear that throughout these neighborhoods when they came screeching to stop at the light. We're having, in average, I'm remembering 2 or 3 fatalities on Keystone in Carmel every year. We haven't had one, by the way, on Keystone since the new project was completed around 2010. 11 years, no fatalities. Contrast, isn't that wonderful? It had an impact. We don't know who those people that would not be alive are, but we know what the statistics are. I had personally known 4 people that were killed on that road before we did that project, and there were many others. It was also a great wall dividing the community. It was like the Great Wall of China. You couldn't walk across it. But this took some work. Fortunately, Governor Mitch Daniels was in office and agreed with me and overruled his Department of Transportation, who didn't want to do it the way we wanted to. So Mitch said, they don't want to do this. Would you take the road for, we'll give you $100 million, 90 initially, 10 later, $100 million and do this project you want to do? Because I don't think our guys will do it the way you want to, and then take it over forever, but it should be a local road. So I think that project impacted the city tremendously. Brian mentioned the Monon, and we had to acquire 243 parcels of property to get that done. It was one of the most complicated legal battles ever. There was already a class action between the train company, which claimed they owned it, and the neighbors on either side of the trail who claimed they owned it, and they were basically suing each other to see who would get the city of Carmel's money. And so we had to buy all these little parcels. It might be $2,000 for this homeowner and $3,000 for that one, depending on how much space. And of course, the line went down the middle. For the lawyers in the room, it had to do with whether they were reversionary deeds or warranty deeds. The reversionary deeds revert back when the old rails were taken up to whoever owned the parcel on either side today, and the train company was claiming there were warranty deeds and they owned the whole thing free and clear. Courts decided for the neighbors eventually on appeal, but we had to convince the neighbors to close those purchases into an escrow to see who had won, so I didn't want to have to buy them twice. That wouldn't have looked good in the Kern and Carmel. Bought property from the wrong people. So that was a complicated project. But think about the ripples of impact that project has had. All the downtown development, downtown Carmel was not doing well prior to the Monon Trail and prior to the city's investment in the Arts and Design District. City center didn't exist. There were still industrial uses, the jobs were gradually being moved overseas by the owners of those companies back in the late 90s and early 2000s, where Midtown is today. None of that contemporary part of Carmel really existed. So Monon Trail was absolutely critical. Brian is right about the conversation with Ron Carter. We were looking at that old Kroger shopping center that had been abandoned when they moved across the street. Ron suggested we put some bricks on it and fix it up, and I said, no, I think we can maybe master plan a new downtown here, because the art and design, we're already starting the annexations and talking about that. 50 square miles, this Carmel today is double the size of the island of Manhattan. It's a big area. We need a real downtown for a city that size. We want to invest in the art and design district, but it's just not big enough. We can do both simultaneously. But that old Kroger shopping center basically became today what is the city center, where Matt the Miller and that entire area is located, leading back to the townhomes. And I remember as we were trying to convince the business community, particularly the real estate community and the realtors in Carmel, that this would work, Ryland Homes came in and said, we'll build those townhomes along the north side of City Center Drive. City Center Drive was under construction at the time. It didn't exist. And most of the realtors I talked to said that will never work. People will never buy townhomes in a place like Carmel. Seriously, they believe that. I think very passionately they believe that, because everybody lived in single-family houses. And we kept thinking that, we're Republicans, and we think, government should have a limited role. And if all we provide by law, by zoning law, is for single-family houses, we're telling everybody who wants to live in an apartment or a condominium in a townhome, they're not welcome here. You got to live like everybody else. Well, that seemed to me like government intrusion. So that was very much a sea change we had to convince the public and the business community to make as we tried to encourage this urban downtown. And these are just a few of the many things that we tried to do to change the culture of the community, to have this downtown to be more competitive. What I'd like to do now is see if anybody has any questions or criticisms, or we missed somebody's trash today, you can tell me. I'd like to hear some of your reactions about the change and how you make these, and I've got to recognize two people that are here too that have been instrumental. In particular, Jeff Worrell over here as Councilor at Large has been one of the most influential people in the city of Carmel for decades. First in his many volunteer activities, more recently as a redevelopment commissioner, and then a city councilor at large. So Jeff, thank you. We couldn't have done the things we've done in Carmel without many people, but particularly leaders like Jeff helping. And we got Mark Herbrandt here as one of our county commissioners. Mark has been tremendously, there he is in the back, been tremendously helpful to the city of Carmel at the county level. I go to mayors' meetings where mayors come from all over the country to meet at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and I hear these stories about different units of government just fighting and not working together, and I generally keep my mouth shut because I think this is the exact opposite of what we have here in central Indiana. What I see in central Indiana is all the cities and there's some fun competition without question, but everybody really comes together for the greater good. Oh, Adam Austin slipped in on me, and I didn't see it until just now. Adam represents this district and has been instrumental, relatively new city councilor. Used to cover me like Brian Bottas did for the Kern and Carmel, and got very interested in government and is doing a tremendous job on our city council.
How's everybody doing? All right, give it for the mayor one more time. Thank you, bro. Hey, my name is Rashad Cunningham. I am pastor of Synergize is what they call me. I'm also a pastor in the community. I'm going to pray over all of this. I have a scripture on my heart just from listening to the mayor. In Ecclesiastes, thinking through it, it says that it's better to have a good name than good perfume. It says that it's expensive perfume. Okay, somebody laughed about that. It also says that it is it's better to be patient than to be prideful. And then it goes on and says, in the day of prosperity, be happy, but in the day of adversity, understand that God made both the good and the bad. We have just enough blessings to be happy and just enough suffering to be humble. Today, as we celebrate the legacy of our mayor, we also celebrate the legacy of our brother Brian. It's a weird day that is happening at the same time here, right? And in the midst of that, can you just imagine that both of these men have left a legacy, right? They've both left a legacy. And as I was listening to the mayor, he said one of the reasons he did a lot of the things that he did in the community was because he didn't want to build for cars, he wanted to build for people. That hit me so hard because I have to ask each and every one of us who are mayors in our own ways, in our own lives, our communities, our workplaces, what are we building for? Are we building for the cars? Are we building for our houses? Are we building for all that stuff that's going to pass away? Or are we building for people? Are we actually building for people? So as somebody who's new to the community, I thank you because I'm one of those people who is reaping the benefits of all the work you've done over the years. There's somebody here who was actually born in 1996, so I thought that was pretty neat. But I challenge you with this before I open up in prayer. I challenge you with this. What metaphorical roundabouts and avenues and midtowns are you going to build in the lives of those around you so that life is better for them? So that when they come into your town, into your oikos, into your surroundings, life is actually better for them. And what name will you leave behind when it's all said and done? So let's just think about that. I'm going to pray over you, Mayor, if that's okay. Heavenly Father, we thank you this evening. The Bible says, Father, that nobody is in a position of power without you allowing it. So no matter the amount of votes that happen years after years after years, Father, there's something you saw to allow this man to lead this community. Father, we also pray over our brother Brian, the legacy that he left and just an example of what it's like to love the person in front of you. Tonight, Father, we are celebrating two men who have loved the people who were in front of them over time. We ask that you pierce our hearts with their messages, with their lives, with their legacies, Father, so that we go on to imitate them as we imitate your Son, Jesus. If there's anybody in this room, Father, who just doesn't know that, give them the freedom to just come and talk to us. But for those of us who do know, Father, may we just stop sitting on the sidelines and watching brothers like this and instead get out there and start building in the same ways they are. It's in Jesus Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Thanks, Rashawn. Absolutely. Stay up, everybody. Thanks, guys, so much for coming tonight, and thank you very much, Mayor, for addressing us and all the work that you've done. And obviously, we're here. We've raised a little bit of money. And Heather, how do we do?
So as you all know, our memberships, even though we're not raising money for a specific nonprofit tonight, a portion of each membership does go towards our Synergize Impact Fund. And so this month, that total is $2,075. And that will bring our full total to $69,269 raised in 2021. And so we are doing something special tonight. You might have seen on our graphics that we're supporting a surprise impact. And actually, one of us knows what that impact is. Mayor Brainerd.
Well, I was asked to think about how we could have impact with this amount of money, which is substantial for one evening. And I thought about one of our newer community projects that we've been working on for almost 10 years, and that is the Great American Songbook Museum. Does everybody know what the Great American Songbook is? It's that genre of, thank you, that genre of music, the 1930s and 40s that got us through the Depression and World War II, the Frank Sinatra songs, a lot of the Broadway tunes, George Gershwin, Hoagie Carmichael and Cole Porter from Indiana. Hoagie, wrote Stardust, which, by the way, is a sculpture there by the Palladium. You see the stars coming out of the old Victrola. You can go to the side where the little kiosks are and hear about it, turn the crank. But Nashville, Tennessee has a country music museum. Cleveland, Ohio has the Rock and Roll Museum. We want to build, and working with Michael Feinstein, our artistic director at the Palladium, to take his archives, which he's collected over his entire lifetime, and others that our foundation has obtained to build a museum. And we think, okay, how's that going to impact people in Carmel? Well, it's a national, international museum, but what it will do is bring visitors here from all over the world. Those visitors will stay here, they'll shop in our stores, they'll eat in our restaurants. It will create a tremendous amount of economic growth for our city. But perhaps even more important, it tells the story of America through some tough times, and it tells it through the lyrics of those songs. And to have that sort of museum that explains that part of our history and our culture of this country here in Carmel, Indiana, I predict will have a huge impact for hundreds of years. We need somewhere between $50 and $60 million to get there. The Simons, believe it or not, Brian, actually donated about 20% of that already. Bryn Simon in particular did that, so we should give her a round of applause, even though she's out on the West Coast. But she believes in what we're doing with that museum, and so that's where I'd like to see that $2,000 go. It will have many ripples of impact, I think.
Awesome, thank you.
Aaron? So what's next?
One more surprise. I know this one's taking kind of a little bit longer because it's a little different than we normally do. So that's why we made it 3 hours so everyone can still have a couple hours of socializing. So you guys are good. Brainerd, if you would like to, Mayor, if you'd like to stay up here. We have 2 other people that are going to share real quick for one more surprise we have for the evening. Alan? Brainerd said, I wondered why he was here. Because we're tight like that. We're bros, so that's why he's here.
Hi, Mayor. Hi, everyone. I'm Alan Sutherland. You were my intern when you were in college. And I went on to develop a international practice in political consulting. And I just finished up a presidential campaign and was saying I never wanted to do that again. And I got a phone call. And so the mayor told me he wanted me to stop by. He was thinking about running for judge. And so I went up to his office, a small office in Carmel, and he said, if I told you what I really wanted to do, I knew you wouldn't come. I want to run for mayor. And as he knows me over the years, I said what I always say, let me think about it. And we put together a winning campaign, and that was the beginning of what will be an 8-term mayor, I hope, to continue this vision. Now, you know, I have to tell you, I'm a founder of a charter school in Indiana. It's called the Indiana Agriculture and Technology School. So rather than changing into a tie and suit and everything else like I sometimes do for you, I left the farm and drove up and got here tonight. One more story. I don't know, how many of you know that Hamilton County owns the executive airport up on 32? Okay. Most of you don't know that it was the mayor's vision to own that airport. We had a problem called contiguity. And rather than not being able to annex the entire west side of Westfield to get to it, he talked the county into buying that airport and creating a legacy for this area for years to come. And it's my pleasure to be here tonight to continue to work with you. Thanks.
Thank you, Alan. That was very nice. Well, shortly after the mayor won that first election, he asked to speak to the board of directors of the Chamber of Commerce. And when that day came, he bounded up the stairs, sometimes two at a time, I think, full of energy and ideas. And as he reached the top of those stairs of the old farmhouse on Main Street, which was the home of the Carmel Chamber of Commerce, he was ready. His arms were full of huge poster boards depicting his dream, what he thought a new downtown could look like. When he went into that room, he faced a huge conference table that was almost as big as the room. And seated around that table was the intelligentsia of Carmel, the leaders of Carmel, those attorneys, those bankers, the business owners, and accountants. I was in that room. I wasn't part of the intelligentsia, but I was in that room that day, and I saw the new young mayor spare no words or details, as is his custom, and he began to paint a picture of what his vision for a new downtown could be. And he wanted everyone to be proud of a new downtown. He wanted Carmel to be more than just a place to live and sleep, but a place where you could work, a place where you could play, and a place where you would have everything you need to raise your family. Well, when the presentation was over and it was time for him to leave, he gathered up his boards, went back down those stairs and out the front door. What he left behind was a very quiet room. The energy was gone. And those people sitting around that conference table were recovering from the whirlwind that they had just experienced. Now, not a single person, not even me, believed that what he had on those boards was anywhere near possible. And actually, many were frightened by one of the boards that showed a brand new live-work building right where the old farmhouse was currently standing. I don't know if that was wise, Mayor. Now, fast forward to just a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity on a beautiful Saturday morning to go to Carmel Farmers Market. And I walked out to the middle of Carter Green, and I just stood there and did a slow 360-degree turn. If you haven't done it, I highly recommend it. Now, the beauty and the view is unbelievable. It's magnificent. But it wasn't just the beauty of the buildings. Yes, the Veterans Memorial and the reflecting pool are stunning. And now there are multiple famous Carmel icons in that view shed, the Palladium, the Hotel Carmichael, and the Tarkington. But it was more than just the beauty of the buildings. It was what I saw the people doing. And the people had a place where they could come together, maybe neighbors seeing neighbors, friends connecting with friends, friends that maybe hadn't seen each other for a week, a month, or a year. And there were families who were enjoying each other, talking to each other. I didn't see a whole lot of phones out. And they were communicating and maybe just forgetting about what might be going on in their lives. They had a place in their hometown where they could gather together. And so, what many, and you've always said, I've heard you say it, that location, having those areas like Midtown, like Carter Green, like Sophia Square, a place where people can gather and connect with their community, somewhat like we used to do at the end of our driveway or around the mailbox. So many of you here today probably don't even remember what Main Street was, and you probably don't even remember the old farmhouse on Main Street, just east of Range Line on the south side of the road. But I do, and so it is with tremendous honor and great pride that I've been given just a few moments to share with you some context about the man who would not give up, the man who certainly had a dream, but he also had a vision on how to get there. And so, Mr. Mayor, you have all of our admiration, you have our gratitude, and I am thankful that I can call you a friend. And so, congratulations to our Mayor James Brainerd on receiving the first ever Synergize Legacy of Impact Award. And please know that we are all a grateful community, and please accept our enthusiastic thank you, Mayor Jim Brainerd.
Well, that was awesome. That was just as cool as I envisioned it in my head. I just wanted to close out by saying, when my wife and I came here and decided to transition out this way, a lot of the people here in this room I got to know before we had even made our move out here. Friendships I was able to start building, and Brian's one of those guys that he had been in the area, he had had a lot of relationships and a lot of friendships. Pierre is another one of those guys. My Aunt Tina and my Uncle Chris are a couple of those people. There were essentially maybe 15 people in this area that had taken the time to think that my story, which wasn't crap, which was kind of a broken story and not a whole lot of value there, that thought that my story mattered, saw potential in me, and allowed me to step into their lives and essentially do life with them. And from there, opportunities opened, and it was tough, it was really hard, and it's been a beautiful, beautiful experience. I know a lot of you in this room, some of you I don't know in this room, but you're here, so awesome, I'll hug you if you come close. But Mayor Brainerd, a lot of these stories and stuff that I heard tonight I didn't know. We don't know people's journey. It's easy to look at them and see where they're at or what they've done, what we like and don't like, and criticize it or compliment it. But I know my journey's been tough, and if it hadn't been for God and my amazing wife and people that I'm able to call friends and actually call family, because that's what you become, none of this would even be possible. And it started with a lot of you putting in the work and doing the things that people thought wasn't possible or didn't agree with, so that this next generation, I'm not saying like you're gone and we're taking, I'm just saying that this next generation of people that want to contribute and pour and make lives of people better and the place that they call home better than it was before they got there, rather than just taking from it. None of that would have been possible without you doing your part. So your legacy and the impact that you've made has made it possible for a lot of us to step up and have the opportunity to do the part that we feel like we were made to do. So thank you guys. Grab some more food, grab some more drinks. And share your stories with people and get to know them for who they are, because the people in this room are truly amazing people. And if you get to know each other the way that I've been blessed to get to know each other, you guys will fall in love with each other. So, like, not like, but you know what I mean, yes.